My belief in her fell away like sand through fingers when the test showed 0.0% probability. Lies can wound you twice, first with deception, then with the violence used to keep them alive. My name is Lawrence Woods, and I'm 33 years old. Each morning, I wake in a house that once echoed with promises about our future. I had painted the nursery pale green, set timers for Avery's prenatal vitamins, and whispered to a belly carrying a stranger's child. Avery Woods, my wife of 5 years, transformed from my partner to my attacker when confronted with evidence of her affair. Her nails left marks on my arm that faded faster than the betrayal in my chest. I didn't shout back. I documented. I strategized. I refused to be both deceived and destroyed. If you've ever been betrayed, you know the moment clarity replaces grief. Being precise in your response cuts deeper than rage ever could. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. The envelope lay between us on the kitchen island, like a bomb waiting to detonate. I'd placed it there deliberately. The crisp white paper stark against the dark granite. Avery stood across from me, arms folded over her sweatshirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The afternoon light caught the diamond on her finger. 5 years of marriage captured in a stone that suddenly felt meaningless. "Say it," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. "Say whose child this is." Her eyes narrowed, darting between my face and the envelope. "Yours?" she said without hesitation. "It's your baby, Lawrence." I pulled the paper from the envelope and slid it across the counter. "The lab disagrees. They're wrong." She didn't even glance at the results. "These tests make mistakes all the time. 0% probability, Avery. Not low probability. 0. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. "You're trying to stress me out and hurt the baby. Is that what you want?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. The woman I'd loved for years was looking me in the eye and lying without flinching. "I matched the dates," I said, pulling out my phone and opening my calendar app. "Your late work conference last fall. That's when conception happened, according to your doctor's timeline." She shook her head dismissively. "You're being ridiculous. I've got your location pings, Avery. Hotel receipts. Both yours and Emil's cars in the same parking garage." I laid my phone on the counter. Screenshots visible. "Stop lying." Something changed in her face then, the mask slipping to reveal panic beneath. In a flash, she lunged across the island, her nails scraping down my forearm as she grabbed for my phone. "Give me that!" she shouted, clawing at my hand. I pulled back, blocking with my forearm. "Avery, stop!" Her nails raked across my skin, leaving angry red welts. She managed to knock the phone free and immediately hurled it across the kitchen. It hit the wall with a crack and clattered under the table. "You will not leave me," she hissed, breathing hard. Her eyes were wild, unfamiliar. "And you will not embarrass me like this." I touched my arm where she'd scratched me, feeling the sting. This woman, this stranger with my wife's face, had just attacked me. "I'm not leaving you," I said, reaching for my keys on the counter. "I'm evicting you from my life." She shoved me then, hard enough to knock me back against the edge of the counter. The corner dug into my lower back, pain flaring sharp and immediate. I stepped away from her, keeping the island between us as I retrieved my phone from under the table. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. Avery went pale. "Lawrence, don't." "Too late," I said, as the dispatcher answered. The officers arrived within 15 minutes, a male and female pair who separated us immediately. They took photos of the scratches on my arm, documented the scene, and interviewed us separately. The female officer, Rodriguez, according to her nameplate, gave me a sympathetic look. "You should consider filing for a protective order," she said quietly. These situations can escalate. I nodded, watching as Avery sat at our dining table, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to the male officer. She'd switched tactics completely. Now she was the devastated pregnant woman whose husband had accused her of cheating. I'll need to make arrangements, I told Officer Rodriguez. She can't stay here tonight. After the police left, Avery packed a bag in tense silence. I called her brother to pick her up, only to discover he wasn't answering. That's when she finally spoke. I already called Emile, she said, not meeting my eyes. He's on his way. Emile. Not her brother. Her friend from work, who'd been around too much lately. The pieces clicked into final damning place. Half an hour later, headlights swept across the living room as a car pulled into our driveway. Emile got out, his muscular frame moving with barely contained anger as he approached the front door. I stood in the doorway as Avery brushed past me with her suitcase. Emile glared at me, jaw tight. "You're going to pay for this," he said, voice low. "No," I told him, feeling strangely calm. "I'm done paying for both of you." I watched them drive away, the taillights disappearing around the corner. Then I closed the door, locking it with a final click. The house felt cavernous in its sudden quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the temporary protective order paperwork Officer Rodriguez had left me. Tomorrow I'd need to go to court to make it official. Tomorrow I'd need to call a lawyer. But tonight, I just sat in the stillness, wondering what storm would come next. I woke to a silence so complete, it felt like a physical weight. No coffee brewing, no shower running, no morning news playing in the background. Just the empty echo of a house that suddenly felt too large. The events of the previous night crashed back over me like a wave. I checked my phone. 7:13 a.m. Too early to call most people, but attorneys start their days early. I'd met Harper Doyle 3 years ago when he handled a contract dispute for my inspection business. He'd impressed me with his methodical approach and unflinching directness. I found his number and dialed, not really expecting him to answer. "Doyle," came the crisp voice after just 2 rings. "Harper, it's Lawrence Woods. I'm sorry to call so early, but I need legal help. Personal, not business. What's happened?" No pleasantries, just straight to the point. That's why I liked him. I laid it out as factually as I could. The paternity test, Avery's reaction, the physical altercation, the police report, and the temporary protective order. My voice only wavered once, when I mentioned the baby wasn't mine. Harper was silent for a moment. "Do you have a prenuptial agreement?" "Yes. We signed one before the wedding." "Good. Do you have a copy?" I glanced toward the office. "In my filing cabinet." "Find it. Read it to me. Specifically any sections on infidelity and dissolution conditions." I put him on speaker while I retrieved the document. The prenup was Harper's work, too. Another reason I'd called him first. Section 4.2, I read. In the event of proven adultery by either party, the offending party forfeits all rights to spousal support and equitable division of marital assets acquired during the marriage. "And the house?" Harper asked. I flipped to the property section. "Separate property. I bought it before we were married, and it's solely in my name." "Good." His tone was reassuring. "Here's what you need to do immediately. First, freeze your joint accounts. Transfer your direct deposits to a new individual account. Cancel any joint credit cards. Document everything, and I mean everything, including financial transactions going back at least a year." "She's pregnant," I said, the reality of it still a punch to the gut. "With another man's child, according to your test," Harper reminded me. "Lawrence, listen carefully. Her pregnancy doesn't entitle her to your financial support if the child isn't yours, and if she violated the prenup through adultery. What about the protective order? We'll file to make it permanent today. I'll have my assistant prepare the paperwork. Can you be at my office at 11? I'll be there." After hanging up, I moved like a man with purpose. I called the bank, froze our joint accounts, and opened a new individual checking account. I canceled our shared credit cards and requested detailed statements for the past 12 months. I called my employer to redirect my direct deposit. The morning flew by as I gathered evidence, screenshots of location data from our shared family account, hotel receipts forwarded to our shared email, text message backups. I created a timeline of Avery's work trips that coincided with gaps in our text conversations. Around noon, I stepped into the backyard to clear my head. The spring air was warm, flowers pushing up through the soil in the garden beds Avery had planted, but rarely tended. "Lawrence," Mrs. Fernandez called from over the fence. She was in her late 60s, a widow who had lived next door since before we bought the house. "I saw the police cars last night. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, then decided the truth would come out eventually. "Avery and I are separating. Things got heated last night." Mrs. Fernandez nodded slowly. I heard the shouting. Not for the first time either. This surprised me. "You've heard us arguing before?" "Not you," she clarified. "Her. Sometimes when you were away on jobs. That young man's car would be parked out front. The dark-haired one with the sporty car. Emile." My stomach tightened. "Mrs. Fernandez, would you be willing to write down what you've seen and heard? It might help my case." She straightened her shoulders. "Of course. That girl has been taking advantage of you for too long." By evening, I had a folder of evidence and Mrs. Fernandez's handwritten statement. I was just heating up leftover pasta when the doorbell rang. A courier stood on my porch with a manila envelope. "Lawrence Woods? That's me. Legal service." He handed me the envelope and walked away. Inside were court papers filed by someone named Caroline Mercer, attorney at law, on behalf of Avery Woods. The allegations made my blood run cold. Emotional abuse, financial control, and aggressive behavior threatening her pregnancy. She was requesting temporary spousal support, exclusive use of our home, and a restraining order against me. I sank into a kitchen chair, papers spread before me. The house's silence seemed to mock me now. Avery had wasted no time twisting everything around, painting herself as the victim. She was going to drag this through court, make it as messy and painful as possible. The paternity test sat among the scattered papers, indisputable evidence of her betrayal. But would it be enough? I sat rigidly in the courtroom, eyes fixed forward. The wooden bench felt hard beneath me, but I barely noticed. Harper sat beside me, calm and collected in his charcoal suit, legal papers arranged in precise stacks before him. Across the aisle, Avery perched like a wounded bird, her attorney whispering in her ear. She dressed differently than I was used to seeing her. A loose-fitting blouse that emphasized her pregnancy, hair pulled back in a modest ponytail, the picture of vulnerability. When she caught me looking, her eyes narrowed slightly before softening into a practiced hurt expression. I looked away. 5 years of marriage, and I'd never truly known her. "All rise," the bailiff called, as Judge Brennan entered. She was a woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. After the preliminary matters, Harper stood. "Your Honor, we're requesting enforcement of the temporary protective order and exclusive use of the marital residence for my client, Mr. Woods." He presented the evidence methodically. Photos of the scratches on my forearm, the police report, statements from the responding officers, Mrs. Fernandez's written account of seeing Emile's car during my work trips. "Furthermore," Harper continued, "Mr. Woods is the sole owner of the property in question. It was purchased prior to the marriage and remains his separate property, according to the prenuptial agreement, which I have included as Exhibit C." Avery's attorney, Caroline Mercer, rose next. She was younger than Harper, with a sharp bob and an aggressive stance. "Your Honor, Mrs. Woods is 7 months pregnant and in a vulnerable position. My client alleges that Mr. Woods has been controlling and manipulative. He coerced her into taking a paternity test against her will, causing extreme emotional distress during a high-risk pregnancy. My jaw clenched. Harper had warned me not to react. Mr. Woods has sufficient means to secure alternate housing, while Mrs. Woods remains in the marital home until delivery, Mercer continued. We're requesting temporary spousal support during this vulnerable time. Judge Brennan reviewed the papers, occasionally glancing over her glasses at us. Ms. Mercer, regarding the paternity test, does your client dispute the results? Mercer hesitated. We question the methodology and chain of custody, Your Honor. We're requesting a court-ordered test to settle the matter definitively. And the allegations of physical aggression? My client acted in self-defense when Mr. Woods became threatening, Mercer claimed. She was protecting herself and her unborn child. I felt my blood pressure rising. Harper placed a steadying hand on my arm. Judge Brennan studied the photos of my scratched arm, then looked at Avery. Mrs. Woods, these injuries to your husband don't appear defensive in nature. Avery's eyes welled with tears. I was scared, Your Honor. He was yelling, saying horrible things about me and my baby. I hadn't raised my voice once that night. The lie stung worse than the scratches had. After 40 minutes of arguments, Judge Brennan made her ruling. I'm granting Mr. Woods exclusive use of the residence pending further hearings. The temporary protective order will remain in effect. Regarding spousal support, I'm denying that request until paternity is established through court-ordered testing. She fixed Avery with a stern look. The evidence of physical aggression is concerning, Mrs. Woods. I strongly advise against any violation of the protective order. Relief flooded through me. Harper nodded in satisfaction as he gathered his papers. Across the aisle, Avery's face had gone rigid. As we stood to leave, her eyes locked with mine. No pretense of vulnerability now, just cold fury. That night, I slept without fear for the first time in weeks. The house felt like mine again. Quiet, orderly, safe. I woke feeling rested, ready to face whatever came next. My phone rang as I was making coffee. Mom. Lawrence, what's going on? Avery just called me in tears. My stomach dropped. Mom, Avery and I are getting divorced. There's a lot you don't know. She said you threw her out of the house, that you're denying your own child. Mom's voice was tight with disapproval. She said you've been controlling her, checking her phone, following her. I gripped the counter, knuckles white. Did she tell you she's pregnant with another man's baby? Did she mention hitting me, scratching me until I bled? Lawrence! Mom sounded shocked. That doesn't sound like Avery at all. It didn't sound like her to me either, Mom, but I have the lab results and the police report to prove it. My voice cracked slightly. The baby isn't mine. She's been having an affair with Emil. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her processing, reevaluating. Oh, Lawrence. Her voice softened. Why didn't you tell me sooner? It's been chaos. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I sank into a kitchen chair. Mom, she's lying to you. She's lying to everyone. She seemed so sincere. Mom hesitated. Are you absolutely certain about this? That she would question me at all felt like another betrayal. Yes, Mom, I'm certain. After we hung up, I sat holding the phone, the morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. Avery wasn't just fighting for money or the house. She was trying to poison every connection I had, turn my own family against me. The realization left me shaken and furious. We need the test to be bulletproof, Harper said, spreading papers across my dining room table. 3 days had passed since the hearing, and we were plotting our next moves. No room for her attorney to claim contamination or tampering. I nodded, nursing my second cup of coffee. Sleep had been better, but not great. What does bulletproof look like? Court-ordered testing at a certified lab. Chain of custody documentation from start to finish. Harper tapped his pen against the legal pad. 3-party sampling. You, Avery, and a witness, all documented with photo ID. Time stamps on everything. The clinical approach helped keep my emotions in check. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about facts, process, documentation. I want a financial audit, too, I said. I need to know exactly what she spent our money on while she was with him. Harper raised an eyebrow. Good thinking. Marital waste is recoverable under your prenup. He made a note. Let's pull statements going back 12 months. Credit cards, bank accounts, everything. I remembered the weekend she'd claimed was a work conference in Chicago. The hotel bill had seemed high at the time, but I'd brushed it off. Now I wondered how many other work events had been covers. Can we find out if she used our joint accounts to pay for things for Emil? Gifts? Meals? Hotel rooms? Absolutely. Harper looked up from his notes. That's exactly what we're looking for. Every dollar she spent on the affair is a dollar you can potentially recover. That evening, I went through our online banking portal, downloading statements from the past year. The patterns emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Restaurant charges in neighborhoods where neither of us worked. Hotel bookings on weekends when she was supposedly with girlfriends. Expensive gift shop purchases that never appeared in our home. I highlighted suspicious charges, creating a spreadsheet with dates, locations, and amounts. The total made me feel sick. Over $7,000 in less than a year. The next morning, I walked across my front lawn to Mrs. Fernandez's house. She was watering her roses, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Lawrence," she said, turning down the hose. "How are you holding up, dear?" "One day at a time," I replied. "Mrs. Fernandez, I need to ask you something important." She invited me in for tea, and we sat at her kitchen table with steaming mugs. The house smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish, reminding me of weekend visits to my grandmother's when I was a kid. "That night when Avery and I had the argument," I began carefully, "you mentioned hearing some of it through your window." She nodded gravely. "Hard not to." She was shouting quite loudly. "Would you be willing to sign a statement about what you heard? And about the times you saw Emil's car parked outside when I wasn't home?" Mrs. Fernandez didn't hesitate. "Of course I will. That girl has been carrying on behind your back for months. I should have said something sooner." My throat tightened. "You're saying this wasn't a one-time thing?" "Oh, no. That red sports car would be here within 20 minutes of you leaving for work trips. Sometimes, overnight." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm sorry, Lawrence. I thought maybe you had an arrangement. People do these days." "No arrangement," I said quietly. "Just betrayal." Mrs. Fernandez signed the affidavit Harper had prepared, her handwriting neat and precise. Her matter-of-fact testimony would be powerful. An unbiased witness with no stake in our divorce. 2 days later, the judge scheduled the court-ordered paternity test for the following week. Harper called with the news. "Tuesday at 9 a.m., he said. "Both of you will be there, along with court personnel to witness and document. No wiggle room." I felt a weight lift. Once we have those results officially on record, she can't keep playing games about support, right? Correct. If the test confirms what we already know, her leverage evaporates. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a sliver of optimism. That feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. I was checking our accounts again when I noticed something alarming. An old joint savings account we'd opened years ago but rarely used had been nearly emptied. The balance had gone from $3,216.47 to $1.27 overnight. My hands shook as I pulled up the transaction details. A single withdrawal made yesterday afternoon. Avery had walked into the bank and taken everything. I slammed my laptop shut, fury boiling through me. The money itself wasn't life-changing, but the vindictiveness of the act burned. She knew she was losing, so she was grabbing whatever she could on her way down. In the quiet of my house, I walked to the window and looked out at the darkening street. No more. No more giving ground. No more surprises. No more letting her control the narrative. Not another inch, I whispered to myself. Not one more damn inch. I knew emails could be faked. Phone calls could be denied. But a face-to-face encounter with witnesses? That was bulletproof. Harper had connected me with a buddy who owned a small contracting company. He provided a burner phone and company paperwork. Nothing illegal, just smart. The plan was simple, but effective. Trap Emil with his own words. Standing in my kitchen the next morning, I composed the text carefully. Hi, this is Mark from Superior Contracting. Need to confirm appointment for repairs at the Oakwood condo tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please reply to confirm. I hit send and waited. 3 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Yes, we'll be there. Avery and I both. My heart raced. I hadn't even mentioned Avery's name. Emil had just confirmed they were together, in writing. I sent one more. Great. Do you need the entry code again? No, came the reply. We've been using it for months. Months. I took a screenshot, my hand steady despite the anger churning inside me. The next day, I parked my car across from the modest condo building in a neighborhood 20 minutes from our house. I wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, sitting behind the wheel with a coffee I wasn't drinking. At 1:55, Emil's red sports car pulled into the visitor's lot. Avery was in the passenger seat, her profile visible as they walked toward the building entrance. I waited 5 minutes, then walked in through the side door, phone recording in my pocket. The contracting company's actual employee, Jose, was already there with his clipboard, looking official in his work shirt. When I stepped into the condo unit, Emil was complaining loudly. This is the third time I've had to cover for her husband. I'm getting tired of playing the middleman here. Jose nodded sympathetically. Sounds complicated, man. You have no idea, Emil continued, not noticing me hanging back in the hallway. And now, with the baby situation, I'm not looking to be on the hook for a kid, you know? That wasn't the deal. Emil, Avery hissed, finally spotting me. Shut up. The look on his face when he turned was worth every second of pain I'd endured. Shock, then recognition, then barely controlled rage. What the hell is this? He demanded. Just some paperwork, I said calmly, stepping forward. Jose needs a signature for the repair authorization. Jose, playing his part perfectly, held out the clipboard. Just need to confirm who's responsible for the property and authorizing work. Emil glanced at Avery, who had gone pale. Sign it, she whispered. Just sign it, so we can get out of here. Emil scribbled his signature angrily, complete with his full name and date. The document clearly stated he was claiming responsibility for the property. You set this up, he said, jabbing a finger toward me. You think you're so clever. I didn't smile. I don't need to be clever when you've been this careless. Avery grabbed his arm. Let's go. Now. As they pushed past me, Emil bumped my shoulder hard. This changes nothing, he growled. But it changed everything, and we both knew it. That evening, I sat in Harper's office, playing the recording. His face remained professional, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. This is exactly what we needed, he said, pausing the playback. Not looking to be on the hook for a kid is a clear admission. And we have him signing a document claiming responsibility for a property he's been using for the affair. Will it hold up? I asked. With the signed work order, his text messages, and this audio? Absolutely. He's placing himself at the scene of the affair and acknowledging the child situation. Harper leaned back in his chair. The judge will have a field day with this. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of what should have been the nursery. I'd spent weekends painting these walls a soft green, assembling furniture, dreaming of a future that was never going to exist. My fingers traced the border of woodland animals I'd carefully applied, foxes, rabbits, and bears that would never watch over my child. The moonlight cast long shadows across the empty crib. This room represented everything they'd stolen from me. Not just trust, but possibilities, futures. In the darkness, I made myself a promise. This wouldn't end with me broken and them walking away. Emile, who once smiled from my driveway while threatening me, had handed me the key to his downfall. Avery, who thought she could lie her way into security, would learn that truth always surfaces. I wouldn't rage or shout or become the villain in their story. Justice would be cold, precise, and absolutely binding. They'd built this trap themselves, brick by brick, lie by lie. All I had to do was close the door. Harper spread the files across the conference table like a general mapping battle positions. Each document was labeled, tabbed, and placed in logical sequence. "Let's run through it one more time," he said, tapping the first folder. "We start with the police report from the night of the confrontation and the photos of your injuries." I nodded, rubbing my forearm where the scratches had long since healed, but the memory remained. Then, Mrs. Fernandez's affidavit confirming the pattern of Emile's visits and what she witnessed that night. Harper moved his hand to the next file. Financial records showing the hotel charges, gifts, and what we're classifying as marital waste. "And the recordings?" I asked. "We save those for last. The doorbell camera footage first. Then Emile's admission about not wanting to be on the hook for the child. I want the judge to see the full picture before we play the smoking gun." I took a deep breath. "And the lab results?" Harper patted the sealed envelope at the top of the stack. "Court-ordered paternity test with full chain of custody. 0% probability of paternity. Authenticated and incontestable." Something inside me settled at those words. It wasn't relief exactly. More like the quiet certainty that comes when you finally stop running from the truth. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in a navy suit that hung a little looser than it had 6 months ago. Stress and sleepless nights had trimmed me down. I smoothed my tie in the mirror, remembering how Avery used to straighten it for me before important meetings. The memory didn't hurt like it once did. It just felt distant, like watching someone else's life through glass. "You ready for this?" Harper asked, as we walked up the courthouse steps. "More than ready," I replied. "Let's finish it." Inside, the courtroom was sterile and quiet. Avery sat with her attorney, a woman in a severe gray suit who whispered urgently in her ear. Avery had lost weight, too, her pregnancy now prominently visible beneath a conservative maternity dress. Emile slouched in the back row, arms crossed defensively. When the judge entered, a thin woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense expression, the room stilled. "Your Honor," Harper began after preliminaries, "this case presents a straightforward application of the parties' prenuptial agreement, which explicitly addresses the current circumstances." He methodically worked through our evidence. The police report. Mrs. Fernandez's statement about the pattern of visits while I was working. The credit card statements showing thousands spent on hotels and gifts during Avery's supposed work conferences. Throughout the presentation, Avery stared at the table, her fingers working nervously at a tissue that gradually shredded into confetti. She wouldn't look at me, not even when Harper displayed the photos of my scratched arm on the courtroom monitor. "And now, Your Honor, we present the court-ordered paternity test results," Harper said, opening the sealed envelope with deliberate care. The judge reviewed the document, her expression unchanging. 0% probability of paternity, she noted aloud. It was only when Harper played the recording of Emile that Avery finally looked up. Emile's voice filled the courtroom. "I'm not looking to be on the hook for a kid, you know." That wasn't the deal. Emile dropped his head into his hands. Avery's face drained of color. When the recording ended, the courtroom fell silent. The judge removed her glasses, cleaning them methodically while everyone waited. Avery suddenly turned to me, her eyes wet with desperation. "Lawrence," she whispered urgently, leaning across the aisle between us. "We can fix this. Please. We can work through this together." I didn't whisper back. I made sure my voice carried. You put your hands on me and tried to make me raise another man's child. I'm not your fix. The judge replaced her glasses. I've heard enough. The prenuptial agreement will be enforced in full. No spousal support is awarded to Mrs. Woods, as the infidelity clause has been clearly triggered. The protective order is granted for 12 months. Additionally, Mrs. Woods is ordered to reimburse marital funds used in furtherance of the affair, totaling $16,487. She looked directly at Emile. Mr. Emile, while you are not a party to this divorce, you should be aware that my findings today will be relevant to any future paternity action. The court has established clear evidence of your paternity. Avery clutched her purse, the designer one I'd bought for her birthday last year, so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her attorney whispered something that made her shoulders slump further. When she stood to leave, her legs seemed unsteady. Emile finally rose from his seat in the back, his face a mask of resentment as he silently escorted her from the courtroom, neither of them looking back. Harper gathered our documents. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "It's over." But watching them walk away, I knew it wasn't over for them. It was just beginning. 3 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of what used to be the nursery, holding a paintbrush and a small can of primer. The pale yellow walls, the color we'd chosen together during happier times, would soon disappear under fresh coats of a neutral gray. The crib I'd assembled with such care was already disassembled and waiting by the curb for a charity pickup. I'd spent the morning filling boxes with Avery's things, clothes folded neatly, shoes paired up, jewelry sorted. I wasn't being kind, I was being thorough. Each item represented a piece of the lie I was finally putting behind me. Her designer dresses, the ones I'd complimented her in, the perfume I'd given her for our anniversary, all boxed up for donation, except for a few higher-end pieces Harper suggested I sell to offset some of the financial damage. The house felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Even with the boxes stacked in the living room, I ran my hand along the freshly dusted shelves in the hallway, remembering how I used to straighten the picture frames every morning while Avery slept in. Now those frames held different photos. Just me with my mother, with friends, landscapes from hiking trips I'd taken before marriage. The landline rang, cutting through my thoughts. Only a handful of people had that number anymore. "Lawrence? It's Mom." "Hey, Lucia," I said, setting down the paintbrush. "How are you?" "I should be asking you that question," she said. Her voice sounded clearer than it had in months, free of the worry that had edged it since all this began. "How's the house coming along?" "Almost done clearing everything out," I told her. "Starting on the nursery today." There was a brief pause. "Are you okay with that?" "I could come help, you know." "I'm good," I said, and meant it. "It needs to be done." We chatted for a while about neutral things, her garden, a new recipe she'd tried, the weather turning warmer. Then her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, Lawrence, standing your ground like that, not letting them walk all over you. It couldn't have been easy." I leaned against the wall, feeling something tight in my chest loosen slightly. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." "I ran into Sandra at the grocery store yesterday," she continued, "and I knew what was coming. My mother had never been able to resist sharing town gossip. She said Avery's staying in one of those month-to-month apartments over on Westfield. You know, the ones with the green awnings? I did know them. Basic, but decent enough. Is that right? Apparently, Emile's been coming and going. Sandra said they don't look too happy together." She paused. "Not that I care if they're happy, mind you. Just thought you should know they're not exactly riding off into the sunset." "I'm not surprised," I said. And I wasn't. What they had built was founded on lies. Lies don't make for solid foundations. After we hung up, I went back to the nursery with renewed purpose. I took down the cloud decals we'd carefully applied to the ceiling, peeling them away strip by strip. The bare walls looked incomplete, but honest. Real. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper as I was breaking down the changing table. Court clerk processed the reimbursement order. 16,187 should hit your account within 72 hours. Let me know when you see it. I texted back a quick thanks. The money would help, though it wasn't about the dollars. It was about accountability, about consequences matching actions. By evening, I'd managed to transform the nursery into something new. The crib and changing table were gone, replaced by a workbench I'd brought up from the basement. My old drafting lamp stood in the corner, casting warm light across the space. And in the center of the room, a solid oak dresser I'd found at a yard sale waited for restoration. I ran my palm over its scarred surface, feeling the history in the wood. Something about it felt right, taking something damaged and making it functional again. I picked up a sheet of sandpaper and began working on the top, the scrape of grit against wood loud in the silence of the house. The rhythmic motion was meditative. Back and forth, smoothing rough edges, revealing the grain beneath years of neglect. Dust motes danced in the lamplight. My shoulders ached pleasantly with the effort. This house was mine again. Not ours, mine. Every corner reclaimed, every space reimagined. The silence no longer felt empty, just peaceful. As I worked the sandpaper over another stubborn spot, I realized I was humming to myself. Small victories, one day at a time. The dresser would take weeks to properly restore, but I had nothing but time now. And when it was finished, it would be beautiful again, scarred but solid, with a new purpose, just like me. 3 months after the court ruling, I was enjoying my morning coffee when Harper called. "Lawrence, good news. Just got the official documentation from the court clerk. You are officially not listed on the birth certificate. The paternity order has been finalized." I set my mug down, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized was still there. "So it's done? Completely done?" 100%. Emil is legally established as the father, and you have zero financial responsibility. They can't come back later with some technicality. It's ironclad. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the papers she'd emailed over. Official court letterhead confirming what I'd known all along, but now with the full force of law behind it. Not my child, not my responsibility. The system had worked. Later that afternoon, I ran into Pete from my old contracting crew at the hardware store. We'd done several big jobs together before I moved to inspection work. After catching up about mutual friends, he lowered his voice. "Heard you dodged a bullet with that whole situation. Emil's working with us now, you know. Man looks like death warmed over. Emil's on your crew?" That was news to me. Pete nodded. "Started about a month ago, taking every overtime shift he can get. Courts got him on the hook for full child support, medical bills, the works. Judge didn't play around." "Good," I said simply. "Yeah, well, karma's a thing, I guess." Pete scratched his beard. "Word around the site is Avery moved again. 3rd place in 2 months. Guess Emil's not bankrolling her lifestyle anymore, just paying what the court ordered." I tried not to feel satisfaction at this news, but I'm only human. "Where's she staying now?" "Some basement apartment off Maple. Emil was bitching about it being unsuitable for the baby, but apparently that's all she can afford now." Pete shrugged. "Not that they're even together anymore. They're just stuck with each other." That night, I sat on my deck watching the sunset with a cold beer. The air had that perfect early summer warmth, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of kids playing somewhere down the block. I'd managed to finish restoring the dresser in the spare room. My house felt like mine again. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Fernandez. "Just thought you should know. I saw your ex and that man having quite the scene at the Walgreens parking lot. Baby was crying in the car seat. Shameful behavior from both of them." I texted back a thanks for letting me know, though I wasn't sure why she thought I needed the update. Old habits, I guess. Mrs. Fernandez had been my unofficial neighborhood watchdog through the worst of it. A minute later, she sent another text. He was yelling that she trapped him. She was screaming that he ruined her life. Both looked terrible. Some people shouldn't have children together. I set my phone down, not wanting to dwell on their drama. Their implosion wasn't my concern anymore. Still, there was something satisfying about knowing they were facing the natural consequences of their choices. Emile, once so smug and threatening, now grinding through double shifts to pay for a child he never wanted. Avery, who thought she could have it all, reduced to basement apartments and parking lot arguments. The next day, I was clearing out the garage when Mrs. Fernandez appeared at the fence. "Lawrence, dear, I hope my texts didn't upset you," she said, adjusting her gardening hat. "I just thought you should know what's happening." "It's fine," I assured her. "I appreciate you looking out for me." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. It was quite the spectacle. Him saying, "You trapped me with this kid," and her firing back, "You promised we'd be together." Then he said something about how you got the better end of the deal, walking away free while he's stuck forever. I couldn't help but smile a little at that. "Funny how that worked out." "They made their bed," Mrs. Fernandez said firmly. "Now they're lying in it, and neither one likes the view. That poor baby, though." I nodded, feeling a momentary pang for the innocent child caught in their web. But that wasn't on me. I'd escaped the trap they'd set, leaving them to face each other with no one else to blame. "They're unraveling," Mrs. Fernandez concluded, turning back to her roses. "Just thought you should know." 3 months after the ruling, I stood in the doorway of what used to be the nursery. The pale yellow walls were now covered with pegboards holding an organized array of tools. A solid workbench ran along one wall, with my miter saw mounted at the end. The afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting geometric patterns across the floor. It was quiet. Not the hollow, aching quiet from before, but the peaceful kind that meant I was exactly where I needed to be. I ran my hand along the workbench, feeling the smooth finish I'd applied last weekend. There was something healing about working with my hands, measuring twice, cutting once, turning raw materials into something useful, something that would last. The coffee maker in the kitchen beeped, and I went to pour myself a cup. Sunday mornings had a different rhythm now. No walking on eggshells, no calculating Avery's mood, just the simple pleasure of coffee and silence. I picked up my phone and called my mother. "Lawrence," Lucia answered, her voice warm. "I was just thinking about good thoughts, I hope." "Always," she laughed. "How's the workbench coming along?" "Finished. I'm thinking about building some shelves next. Maybe a cabinet for the living room. Look at you, turning into a regular craftsman." Pride colored her voice. "Your grandfather would have loved to see this." I remembered how he'd let me help in his workshop when I was a kid. The smell of sawdust and varnish, the careful measurements, the patience. Yeah, he would have. "And how are you feeling? Really feeling?" I took a sip of coffee, considering. "Good. Quiet. At peace. Peace is better than noise, my boy. Always has been." We talked about her garden, about my work, about nothing in particular. When I hung up, I felt that warmth that comes from knowing you're loved without conditions. The town was small enough that news traveled, even when you weren't looking for it. Pete from the construction site had mentioned seeing Avery last week at the grocery store, looking exhausted and thin, with the baby strapped to her chest. The baby lived with her now, a little girl, I'd heard, but Emile was the one shouldering the financial burden. Child support, medical bills, everything the court had ordered. He also had mandated parenting time, weekends mostly, that everyone knew he resented. Their so-called love story hadn't survived reality. What started as an affair had rotted into mutual bitterness. They weren't a couple anymore, just two people bound by consequence, each blaming the other for their situation. According to Mrs. Fernandez, who somehow always knew everything. They could barely stand to be in the same room during handoffs. Avery would accuse Emile of not caring enough about their daughter. Emile would remind her that he never wanted to be a father in the first place. Round and round they went, their arguments a constant reminder of the choices they'd made. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Avery just called me. Again. I sighed and typed back, "What did she want?" "The same. To tell me how hard things are for her. How lonely she is. How she made a mistake." This wasn't the first time. Avery had been reaching out to Lucia periodically, playing the victim, hoping my mother would somehow advocate for her, as if my mother could convince me to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions. My phone rang. Lucia. "I told her to stop calling," my mother said without preamble. "I told her that she lost the right to my sympathy when she betrayed my son and then tried to hurt him." "Thank you," I said quietly. "It's been months. She needs to move on with her life and leave us in peace." "How did she take it?" "She cried, said I was being cruel." My mother's voice hardened. "I told her she was the cruel one, trying to make you raise another man's child while lying to your face." After we hung up, I walked back to the spare room. The tools hung in neat rows, the workbench clear and ready for the next project. I thought about the nursery it had almost been, the crib I would have assembled, the mobile I would have hung, the midnight feedings I would have done. But that was a different life, one built on lies. I switched off the light and closed the door. In the hallway, I paused, letting the silence of the house wrap around me like a blanket. This was my peace. Hard won, but mine. I didn't get revenge by shouting louder or hitting harder. I won by standing my ground, by being exact, by letting the truth do its work. I left Avery with nothing I owed her, and I left Emile with everything he tried to avoid. She lost her comfortable life, and he gained 18 years of responsibility he never wanted. That's justice. That's peace. And that's the house I live in now. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.